Backyard Farmer is a co-production of NET Television and the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Extension.
Tonight on Backyard Farmer, we'll check out our rain chain at the Backyard Farmer Garden and show you hardscape materials. That's all coming up next, right here on Backyard Farmer. Hello and welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd and we've got another hour of good gardening for you tonight. Joining me on the panel, we have the experts from the University of Nebraska Extension. We have Jim Kalish tonight for insect questions.
Good evening, everybody.
Dennis Ferraro, critters, not turf.
How you doing?
We have Kevin Corus, rots and spots.
Hello, hello.
And Sarah Browning is answering horticulture questions and maybe a turf question or two.
Hi, everybody.
We'd like to hear from you as well. Our master gardeners and Finke professionals are standing by to take your call. Just dial 402-472-1212 if you live in Lincoln. Our toll-free number is 800-676-5446. We also take your emails and pictures for future shows. That address is byf@unl.edu. If you send us an email, please give us as much information as you can about your question. Also include where you live. Due to the number of questions we get each week, we can't possibly get to everybody's on the air. So if you need further information, you can always visit with your local extension educator or your garden center professional. We always like to start with samples, and Jim, I'm afraid there are a lot of people in the state that have squash or pumpkins that look like that, probably.
Yeah, unfortunately. I think I got by a little bit more leniently this year because I don't have too much serious of a problem, but most of the problems that we have with pumpkins or the larger stem squashes would be squash vine borer, and I just want to show here some of the symptoms are, you see there's a lot of splitting of the stem, and this actually could be look really shredded and oozy with bacterial ooze and all those kinds of ugly rots and spots. And then you'll see that the lower leaves are starting to yellow too, and that's because, you know, squash vine borer larvae are inside there feeding in the stem, and then ultimately they block the flow of nutrients and moisture to the top of the squash. But if you have too many zucchinis, this might be something that you look forward to. But I thought I'd give it a quick dissection here, and maybe we can find a borer. I'm just not sure. This is one of those candid moments on Backyard Farmer.
And we don't want to draw blood, please.
Okay, I'll do it this far here like this. Okay, so we have enough where we can see. And I think, you know, because I saw some holes, that the larva actually exited already and went into the soil and pupated. But this is the damage here. And in this case, you know, it wasn't sufficient or extreme enough to cause a serious injury to the plant. But oh, here's a good shot of the exit hole too. All right, so if you keep planting in the same area, squashes in the same area, it's a good idea to turn over the soil and expose those pupae that are there, because otherwise you're planting right into an ideal situation where they can easily reinfest the plants next year. So again, as far as treatment goes, you know, we look for these when the plants are about pencil thick. This would be usually around late June, early July, and look for those dark reddish eggs that are attached at the soil line onto the stem of the plant. And remove them if you can, or treat it with a dust formulation. I like to use carbaryl or something to kill them before they enter into the plant. So, and then plant plenty of plants, and so you can thin out the ones that are infested and keep the good ones.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. Dennis, not so good on things there.
Okay. As things get warmer and things get drier, everybody needs water, including voles. And this is some irrigation pipe from Stromsburg, Nebraska. And you can see these tiny little teeth marks right there. I'm gonna hold this. And they wanted some of the water. And they can tell water's in there. And so, just like they chew roots to get water, you can see they chew it in. And the water probably came out, and all those voles got their water. And this is fairly economical and easy to replace. At the same time, things like pocket gophers want water, and they would chew into roots, even though there may not be water there. This is a fiber optics cable. Wow. This cost over $5,000 to repair, I was told. And this is pocket gopher damage into a fiber optic cable. So when this happens, is very costly. How do you stop this? You can put a drain tile around this and have this go through there. They do sell sleeves of stainless steel or copper wool that can go over these wires, or just a spiral of metal around these wires or around this that will stop these animals from chewing into that. It's probably your best bet. There's nothing you can spray on these. It's like a repellent. Say, well, I'll spray that on before I bury it. That's not going to work. Okay, that's going to, a month later, they won't be able to tell that spray is there. You need to physically protect the irrigation lines and the fiber optics, especially if you have pocket gophers and voles in the area.
Excellent, thank you, Dennis. All right, Kevin, you also have a weapon available there.
I do. It's a tool. I also have a trunk of a plum tree, and this plum tree has a canker. And this particular canker is called ceratocystis canker, but that's not really important. It's a canker, and I'm going to show you what the symptoms look like on the stem or on the branches, but what you'll probably first notice in the landscape, or if you're a commercial producer of plums, what you'll notice out in the orchard is what we call flagging. So there'll be a grouping of leaves that turn brown and are dead. And if you follow that branch down, you will see a canker. So the very first obvious thing that we're seeing is this kind of bleeding out. And this is typical, and it happens along the edge of the margin. It's just a response of the plant. The plant will also do this in response to insect feeding. So sometimes it's difficult to determine whether or not this is the result of the canker or insect feeding. Now, however, this canker fungi or fungus is moved from plant to plant by insects. So a lot of times it's both. You have an insect that bores into the stem and then creates the canker. So if we zoom in, we can maybe even see on the outside of the plant, there's a line. It might not be able to see it with the camera, but it's visible. You can see where part of the wood is sunken, and it's got these really small dots. So you can kind of see here, I'm drawing a, let's see, drawing a line there. On this side is the diseased part, on this side is the healthy part. So anyway, that's what you'll see on the outside. That's a good sign of the canker. If you remove, sorry for the mess, if you remove some of the outer lying bark, it's very clear where the healthy tissue and the diseased tissue meet. You can see that the interior is very brown here and very green here. So it creates a very obvious lesion that you can see. Now, I don't recommend doing this to your tree because that's going to cause a wound, but that is a diagnostic feature. So what can you do about this? Unfortunately, the best management strategy is preventative. These cankers form when you physically wound the tree. So handling the tree. In the orchards, these are mechanically harvested, which means that they grab the base of the tree and shake it really hard and then all the plums fall off. Those kinds of activities, or mowing around it with your lawnmower, create wounds, and that's how these fungi get in and start these long running cankers. Prune out any branches that have it. If it has it towards the base of the trunk, it might mean the end of the tree. There haven't been any successful that I've found any successful curative injections that work to treat these kind of cankers. So that's what to look for, and hopefully you don't have it in your plums.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. All right, Sarah, we have a sweet tater.
Sweet potatoes, yeah. I had a question a couple of weeks ago about sweet potatoes, which I didn't think I answered very well, so I wanted to come back to that. And the question was about when do you harvest sweet potatoes? Sweet potatoes are a warm season crop, and so they need a lot of warm weather, and they're actually a pretty long season crop too. So you really shouldn't even be thinking about harvesting sweet potatoes until we get closer to the late part of September. The thing about them being a warm season crop is that the actual tubers themselves can be damaged pretty easily by cold or by freezes. So you really want to harvest your sweet potatoes just before we get a freeze. Now, if we get a real light freeze, maybe temperatures just down to 33 or 32 that nips the foliage, that's okay. Then right after that, you want to go ahead and harvest your tubers. But don't leave the potatoes in the ground if it's going to get very, very cold. If they get damaged by cold temperatures, then they won't store well, and you'll have problems with them rotting and those types of things. I also brought an ornamental sweet potato plant here with me today because I wanted to answer the other question we get about sweet potatoes in the fall, which is, are the tubers from ornamental sweet potatoes edible? And yes, they are edible. But keep in mind, these plants are not bred for taste, and so even though they're edible, it probably will not be the best tasting sweet potato you ever ate. And really the better use of a tuber on an ornamental sweet potato is just to dry it and hold it over the winter, and then you can use it to grow new plants next year.
Excellent. Thanks, Sarah. All right. Jim, you get the first picture question. This is a viewer who says, these caterpillars, that little white fluffy thing there, are chewing up the basil, and I suspect by this time there is no basil left based on the voraciousness.
Yeah, yeah. That to me looks like a yellow woolly bear caterpillar, and you know, the woolly bear caterpillars that we're so fond of toward autumn that are fuzzy and black and red, but these are a yellow woolly bear caterpillar, and it has a wide host range, which includes weedy plants as well as crop plants too. So my advice would be that when you see them, just pull them off, and you don't even have to treat the basil. Right now we're probably using basil for a lot of our dishes and everything, and so just pull them off. They're not going to sting or anything. That hair is just some degree of protection against predators, because it's really fuzzy, and that's the intent. So just pull them off and move them over to some weed you don't want, or just dispose of them somewhere in a waste area, and they'll be fine on other plants.
Excellent. Thanks, Jim. All right, Dennis, we have a viewer who found a tomato on the ground with animal bite marks, and she was afraid that young garter snakes were eating these.
Okay.
She says it's a San Marzano tomato, which is one of the good ones, and this is the Bennett area.
Okay, definitely not a snake. Snakes are obligatory carnivores, so they wouldn't touch any vegetation. You have 2 incisors and a number of incisors and a couple of canine marks. That's the top jaw of an opossum. You can tell just by looking at teeth. That's a great impression.
Yeah, sure.
If I was a dentist, I would love that impression. So you have an opossum, and usually opossums go after stuff that falls on the ground because they think it's rotting. They're less likely to take stuff that's still on there. If you're having them take a lot of stuff, one thing you can do is make it very distasteful. Maybe put something on the surface. You know, anything like maybe if you're not going to harvest a skin or use a skin, you can put some maybe hot sauce on it, and you know, unless you want hot tomatoes or garlic. I mean, a lot of animals don't like garlic, and if it's like an Italian tomato, that'd be great. Go ahead and make your marinara sauce. So, you know, just put the garlic on it, and then you're all ready for your marinara sauce. So and it stops the opossums.
Thanks, Dennis.
Yep.
Kevin, this is a viewer in Omaha who found this really interesting purple growth in a small patch of grass. Omaha area, lasted about 3 days, and then they mowed and it went away, and it has not come back. What is that?
It's a slime mold. They're actually a single-celled organism. They're called protists. They belong in the Myxomycetes grouping, and that's way too much information. Long story short, I'm nerding out because they're so cool. Long story short is that they're not actually pathogens. They're not hurting the grass or anything. So you can just take like a soaker hose and wash them off, and they'll go away, or just enjoy them while they're there, and they'll go away on their own, as the viewer said they did. So not causing any harm. Slime mold.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Sarah, we have a viewer who has a 5-foot holly on the north side of the house. This is in Plattsmouth. The top is brown, the bottom 6 inches are not. They're wondering what they do. Do they cut it off? Do they wait till spring and see if that top grows back?
I have a neighbor actually who lives near me who has a holly that looks just exactly like this, and I've watched it since early spring thinking that the whole thing was dead, but eventually it sent out some growth from the base just like this one. So those upper branches are dead. If they were alive, they would have sent out new growth by now. So what you need to do is just go ahead and cut the plant back to where you see the green living tissue and let it grow back out again. It was just a horrible winter for hollies and other broadleaf plants, and unfortunately, tremendous amount of damage.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, if you're renovating your outdoor living space, you're probably aware of all the materials out there from which to choose. Here to show us some modern hardscape materials as well as some old favorites is Jed Riggle from General Excavating here in Lincoln.
Some of the newer materials, obviously permeable pavers, that's going to be a paver that has just a little gap between each paver. Then you put a rock between the gaps, so that allows water to go through. It's more eco-friendly, so instead of having the water just shed off your patio, the water's going to actually get absorbed into the ground. Those are going to be your eco-friendly, let water kind of go through. Also, you just have your normal pavers. There's a lot of different kinds. There's 3-piece, there's 1-piece, there's even a 4-piece system. They also just came out with a new one that kind of looks like wood. It's called barn plank. That's a really, really cool one. A little more expensive, obviously, just because it's a newer, very new product. But yeah, that's really neat. Some other stuff, you got your natural products like flagstone. That comes in all different types of color, all different types of shapes, thicknesses. And yeah, that's natural, so it gives you more of that natural feel and gives you more freedom to play with gaps and kind of sizes of your patio and all that. The benefits to that over your normal brick patio is going to be it's going to look a little more natural, and you're going to have a little more play with it. Homeowners, they can definitely do it themselves. It's pretty easy. The biggest thing you have to realize is just your base material. A lot of homeowners think they can just dig a 1-inch base and put sand down, but you really need that consistent 3 inches of base and then maybe an inch of sand. If you don't have that, then over time your patio is going to kind of settle, and then you're going to have to rip it up and redo it. For the base material, you can either use the concrete fines, which is crushed up concrete, or 3/8-inch limestone, which is just crushed up limestone. And basically use that, either concrete fines or 3/8-inch limestone, because you're going to want a material that's going to be easily compactable. That's why you don't do the full 3 inches of sand, because sand just doesn't compact as well as concrete fines or 3/8. I would say, honestly, it's just kind of up to the customer whether you want to do flagstone or pavers, because you're going to be living with it for a while. So, I mean, if you really like the natural look, go flagstone. If you like the more man-made look and you want it to look, you know, if you want to see all your lines and see a pattern, then go pavers. But cost-wise, I mean, you're a little more expensive for pavers, but I always tell people, you know, you're going to be living with it for a while, so just do what you really like.
And as you can see from those images, there are plenty of good hardscape materials to choose from. So whether it's the up-to-date permeable pavers or that old-fashioned flagstone, the choice is really up to your imagination and your design plans. And it's almost like tennis shoes anymore, too many choices.
Yeah.
All right, Jim, you get the next picture. This is a viewer who says, wondering what this is. She's seen all sorts of beautiful butterflies and moths, but has not seen this one.
Wow, okay, well good, congratulations, you've seen one now. That's a polyphemus moth, and we have the largest moth is our Cecropia, which is reddish and dark colored and about 6-inch wingspan. Then comes the polyphemus, which a lot of people like, and it has those silvery eye spots on the front part of the wings, or the top side of the wings. And there's 2 generations with polyphemus, and they feed on like oaks and soft maples and birch, about 20 different kinds of trees and shrubs. And so this is the one from the last generation of this season, and then it will deposit eggs, and then the caterpillars will feed, and they still have time to feed. Well, that's right. This would be the first generation completed. So there's still a second generation. That's late. Yeah. But then the caterpillars will feed, and then they'll create their kind of pill-shaped cocoons that are usually covered with some dry leaves on it, and then they'll be concealed for the winter time. And again, the cycle is repeated next spring. So
excellent.
Fascinating.
Excellent. Okay, speaking of fascinating, Dennis,
Okay.
our very own Wayne Onosaur sent this picture in up from Wayne. So what is the dead thing in the street?
So it's from Wayne or Norfolk?
Norfolk, I'm sorry. Wayne sent it from Norfolk. Yeah.
Yeah, he sent this to me as well, and this was turned into Nebraska Game Parks Commission. As far as I know, this is the furthest north we have verification of an armadillo. This year alone, there's been 6 or 7 verifications of armadillos along Interstate 80 and Ord as well. So armadillos are moving north. And even though you don't think we may have climate change, something is changing.
Something's happening.
They're coming, and so get ready for them.
Well, and timely, one of the questions from our callers, our master gardeners, that just got handed to me is an armadillo at 84th and Highway 2, a dead one. There we go.
And I also heard a dead one on Highway 6 and 66, Highway 6 and 66 just last week. And I said, go back and get it. We need the skull and it was already gone. So people are picking them up. So if you find an armadillo, call Game and Parks, and if you tend to, get them the skull or get them the body. You know, they like to have that.
Great idea.
Do they do much plant damage, Dennis?
They more are going to grub up the lawn and turf looking for insects.
Okay.
And so their digging is what causes the problems with armadillos.
Okay.
Something we haven't had problems with on golf course, but they'll go after grubs and they'll root up a lot of stuff. So that's going to be the problem with them, the damage that we'll have to. And I'm not sure right now we haven't looked at how we're going to control them. There hasn't been enough numbers to worry about it, but we'll have to look into that.
All right, thanks, Dennis. This is a patty pan squash, Kevin, here in Lincoln, and they're wondering what the white spots are.
It looks like classic powdery mildew. You know, I learned last time I was on the show from Lauren that you can actually possibly treat this disease by overhead irrigation. We typically, with fungal leaf diseases, warn against overhead irrigation because it creates a film of water on the leaf surface, and the fungi typically need that film of water to infect and cause disease. Well, powdery mildew is an exception to that rule. It only needs high humidity, and we've had plenty of that. So you can actually try to expose this plant as much as you can to the sun, because that will help in reducing the amount of disease. But you can also overhead irrigate and possibly keep the amount of the disease down. I wouldn't recommend any kind of a chemical treatment, especially if you're going to eat the plant, eat the fruit, the vegetables produced from the plant. So.
Gotcha. Thanks, Kevin. Speaking of squashy things, Sarah, you also have a picture of squash. This is a viewer from Omaha who wonders whether these are just decorative or are they edible?
There are some older heirloom varieties of squash that are warty like this, but that one particularly in the front that has kind of that gooseneck on the front of it looks more like a gourd. And so I don't think that these are going to be edible. If they are gourds, the flesh is going to be really hard. It's going to be very firm. So I don't think it's something you want to eat.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. Well, the recent hot and dry weather in some areas has certainly affected some of our shrubs. Some of them are breaking into fall color because of this kind of stress. So our green and growing tip focuses on knowing the difference between a stressed plant and a diseased one. Even though we're pretty close to fall and that beautiful fall color and those nice cool nights and warm days, we're seeing some fall color in some plants that is really a little bit early. That's typically an indication of stress in the environment and a combination both of drought stress and heat stress. If you look at euonymus or burning bush, that's a classic example of one of the plants that goes into early fall color. People think it's disease, but it isn't. What it is the plant kind of starting to shut down because it simply doesn't have what it needs to get it into the fall of the year. You look at the situation here, it's full sun, it's the top of a berm, it's terrible construction soil. You can see the cracks in the soil itself, and that's really sort of the perfect storm for a plant that needs a little bit more moisture going into the fall of the year. It's a good idea to take a close look around your landscape to check for these kinds of stress symptoms in your shrubs and other plants, and they're probably going to require a good long drink before they go into the winter of the year. All right, Jim, question for you, and this is actually two questions about raspberries from two different viewers. Numerous small white worms in the raspberry fruit over the past couple of years. They sprayed, they cut the plants down in the fall, they raked, they sprayed again, and this year they still have the worms.
Yeah, we have a newcomer fly called the spotted winged Drosophila, and it's a lot like that tiny little red-eyed fruit fly that we are accustomed to seeing all the time in late summer, but this one actually stabs and injures the fruit when it deposits its eggs. So early August is a time when it seems like the flies attack whatever thin-skinned fruit is available, and blackberries and raspberries and other thin type berries are favored. So if you have the maggots in there already, it means it's too late pretty much. We have a trapping program where you just simply use vinegar in a jar and allow access to it by the flies, and you set that out. And I think now, probably in just mid-July, probably will be late or early enough or late enough, you might say, where you can actually capture the first flies that are coming in. And when you first detect the flies, that's where it's really important to be out and spraying, because there's no threshold. Because once they start attacking the fruit, it's just about too late. You can just try to recover whatever you have that's been unaffected, but you're going to take some heavy losses.
All right.
So be aware of that and read all about it. There's a nebuite actually out on spotted winged Drosophila, so check online.
Excellent, thanks, Jim. Alliance, Nebraska, Dennis,
Okay.
in the Sandhills rural location, they're wondering whether rattlesnakes travel into farmyards to get water, or do they get it from their prey?
They actually get more of it from their prey, but they also need, if it's too dry and they're not getting enough prey, they will go after places that are wet. We never found, when we put telemetry in rattlesnakes in the Sandhills of Nebraska, if a rattlesnake goes a mile, that's a long way. So the travel is not going to be very extensive, but they do take free water and they rather get it out of their prey, but lots of times they don't find a lot of prey. Sometimes rattlesnakes only 2 or 3 times a year or so. They do have to go for water.
All right, thanks, Dennis. Kevin, we have a viewer who wants to know what the address is for the diagnostics lab.
Great. If they have a sample they'd like to send in, first I'd recommend putting that sample in a sealable plastic bag before you put it in a secondary container like a box to ship it. And then you can ship it to, address it to the Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic. And that's at 448 Plant Sciences Hall. Ooh, you can see it on the bottom of the screen there. 1875 North 38th Street in Lincoln, Nebraska. So
Excellent.
I'll look forward to seeing it.
Excellent, and hopefully it won't be too smelly or nasty when you get
That's
it.
another thing too, yeah. We recommend that you send the sample early in the week, Monday through Wednesday. You don't want to send it on a Thursday or Friday and risk it getting stuck in the delivery truck over the weekend or something like that and turning to mush or drying out or something like that. So send it early in the week.
But plus there's insect identification, weed identification, right?
Oh, for sure, yes, we offer all sorts of not just disease identification, but yeah, like Jim said, insect identification, weed ID.
And even horticultural plant.
Horticultural plant ID.
No dead animals.
No dead
Yeah, the rattlesnakes, just call us and I'll send a student out to get them. Do
No
not
armadillo skulls.
No live animals in the mail, especially no rattlesnakes. But if you have an unusual one, we will send a student out to pick it up. But yeah, do not send them in the mail.
Okay, Sarah, we have a viewer who lost a semi-dwarf apple tree. One snapped off, and they're wondering how close to the stump or the old tree they can plant a new one.
Since the tree you lost, just the trunk broke, the only real limitation there is just the physical presence of the old trunk. So you're just going to have to come far enough away from it that you can, dig a nice planting hole to get the new tree started off properly. So it's really just a physical thing.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Well, most tomatoes shouldn't have stripes, but we've got some that are supposed to be that way. Before we head into break, let's take a minute to see what else we find out in the Backyard Farmer Garden. This week, our Backyard Farmer Garden is getting ready for the return of the students and for late August, September. Our master gardeners have started their fall crop of lettuces. They're in the ground, but they have not come up yet. We have some ripe cherry tomatoes, and we have our striped tomato beginning to show its stripes, which is not a disease. It's supposed to look like that. People who don't like mint don't understand the pollinators because it's in full bloom and full buzz. You'll notice also that our bean crop has actually grown out of the damage done earlier in the season, including the purple foliaged and purple flowered and purple podded one. So we didn't spray, and we still are going to have a great crop of both edible beans and ornamental beans. We have Argara beginning to bloom greatly, and that is kind of a light, airy plant, a little difficult to photograph, but beautiful in the fall garden. We also still have coneflowers going strong, and all of those pumpkins, squash, and watermelons are running into the pond. We need to take a short break, but before we go, we wanted to show you a little surprise that we got from a loyal viewer this past Saturday at the NET Open House.
This one looks like it has a dandelion. Yes, they've been in the kiln probably about 7 times at 10 hours of firing at 1400 degrees.
This one, is that okay?
The snake. And you know what? I thought of you, but I can't draw a snake. You you guys are family. I've got goosebumps just thinking that.
Backyard Farmer!
Thanks for staying with us on Backyard Farmer. Coming up soon, Jeff Culbertson will talk to us about the new rain chain, and we'll see Gladys's plant of the week. You can still phone in your questions by dialing 1-800-676-5446. We also all want to say thank you to Mary Osterhaus for the incredible cups that she spent so much time on. So we just have some pretty fabulous fans in this state. All right, thanks, Mary. And it is time, Sarah, to start the lightning round. We're going to put a minute on the clock. We're going to start with you. Are you ready to go?
Great, I'm ready.
Your very first question is, this person wants to know how they can actually kill weeds in their asparagus. What would they do to kill weeds in the asparagus?
Actually, the best time to do that is in the spring. After you've done your last harvest, cut all the stems down, and then you can overspray the planting with Roundup. Otherwise, you're just going to have to hoe and hand weed and go at it by hand.
All right. Will sedum seed itself?
Generally, no.
All right. Can this viewer cut the flowers off of hens and chicks after they're finished, and also of sedum?
Sure. The hens and chicks do look kind of straggly after they bloom, so go ahead and cut them off.
All right. Are the brittle branches that break off of tulip tree usual, or is there something wrong with them?
No, tulip tree does tend to be rather brittle wood.
Okay. Will Concord grapes grow very well in Sutherland, Nebraska?
Concord generally doesn't do well in Nebraska at all, so that wouldn't be one of the preferred varieties.
All right. Should this viewer seed before they aerate, or aerate before they seed?
Aerate, then seed.
Is it okay to protect strawberries and newly planted veggies, perennial veggies, with mulch or straw for the winter?
Straw would be better because it doesn't compact together and get quite as dense. If you had mulch and it got too much moisture, it can actually start some rots. So hay would be the better choice.
Excellent.
Or straw.
Thank you, Sarah.
Great job, Sarah.
Good.
Okay, Kevin, you ready?
Bar, yes, ma'am.
Okay, we have a viewer who has a bright yellow patch of something that looks like mold 6 inches across. What do you think it might be, and is it harmful?
It sounds like another slime mold, yellow slime mold. I wouldn't recommend eating it. If you want to get rid of it, spray it with a Zocra hose.
All right. This person put compost in the hole where an old tree was, and then now they're wondering if they're going to get mushrooms growing up in that compost hole.
Probably not in the compost hole. If you took a tree out, there's probably roots, maybe some surface roots that have spread from that hole. You might get the fungi to produce there, but probably not in that hole because there's a lot of microorganisms now competing because of the mulch. So,
all right. Is the timing about over for turf diseases, or are we into round 7?
well, we still might see them pop up. What we can do about it now, not so much, but it is getting hotter and drier, so that's a good thing.
All right. We have branches of apples and crab apples dying pretty rapidly. Single branches. What might that be?
Apples and crab apples, if it's really dark colored, it could be fire blight. We have a lot of that this year in southeast Nebraska.
All right. And does downy mildew affect the sun patients or just the impatients?
I believe so. I would need to look at the scientific name of the sun patients, but actually I don't know. I don't know. I reneged that answer. I don't know.
Okay.
Ask again next week.
We'll do it. We'll do it because you're on next week.
Yeah, shoot.
All right. You ready, Dennis?
I am ready. I got my cup, my lucky cup, and I'm ready to go.
There we go. Okay, what is the best bait to get squirrels to go into a live trap?
Peanut butter on dry corn, field corn.
And then what do you do with them?
You can translocate them within 100 yards, or you could pretty much, that's about it. You can euthanize them, but it's not recommended.
All right. Where do garter snakes spend the winter?
Any place that doesn't freeze, along your foundation, old cisterns, manhole covers down underneath there.
Okay. Do you clean up mouse droppings wet or dry?
Always wet, never dry. Never vacuum, never sweep.
Okay. Is porcupine damage to trees possible in the southeast corner of the state?
They are moving. We found them last year for the first time in Douglas County at Lawrence Gardens, so porcupines are moving east.
Okay. If you knock squirrel nests down out of the trees, will they rebuild in the same spot or will they relocate?
They'll probably rebuild in the same tree, not necessarily the same spot.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
Good,
Nice
Dennis.
job. Ready?
Yep.
Okay, this viewer says she is still seeing aphids on her sunflowers and is wondering how many generations are there?
Oh, there's probably 10, 20, 30 generations if you have a long season, so
And what do you do about them?
enjoy them. Sunflowers can tolerate them pretty well.
Okay. What should be sprayed on apple trees now to stop what appears to be insects that are boring into the apples? Are they coming in or coming out?
You can't do anything. It's probably insects coming out of the apples, but you can't do anything. It's too late this season.
All right. What sort of little black and orange insect might be feeding on asparagus, and can it kill it?
That's probably asparagus beetles. They're going to linger until we hit autumn, and they overwinter as adults. And so, just like Sarah said, you got to clean up the patch really well and take care of them early on in the next season.
All right. Is there a systemic that will treat, the viewer is saying, tent caterpillars?
There's no need for that. If you have a power sprayer, blast them away, or just rake them out with a rake because they're helpless once they're out of their tent, you might say.
Excellent. Nice job, all. And Gladys's plant of the week is a really unusual one, isn't it, Sarah?
Yeah, definitely. And the names of these two plants might be a little confusing because we have Angelica and then we have Angelonia. So the little flower here in the front with these little flowers on the long spikes is Angelonia, or oftentimes called summer snapdragon. It's an annual in Nebraska, and it's a great annual. It's one of my favorites. There are lots of different cultivars of this, and you can get them ranging in height from about 12 inches up to about 18 inches or even a little bit taller, 24 inches sometimes. And they usually come in pinks and whites and lavenders, that color range. They're a nice vertical plant, so they look really great in a container if you need some kind of a vertical accent. And they'll just keep blooming and blooming and blooming all summer. You deadhead the stalks when the flowers fade, and they'll just keep blooming more and more all summer long. So they're a great plant. The other plant then that Gladys brought for us here is Angelica, and that's this one with these really unusual seed heads. Angelica is a big plant. It gets to be 5 feet or sometimes even more in a landscape. So it's one of those plants that gives you a really big architectural sort of a look in a landscape. It grows as a biennial, so usually you seed it the first year and then it will grow and it'll bloom the second year. Gladys says she has to transplant her plants when they're small in the first year. Otherwise, they don't survive the transplanting very well. So she says don't try to move them in the second year. They just don't do well. They prefer damp soil, so that would be the best location for those. But so two great plants, and Angelonia and Angelica.
Excellent. And those are very beautiful as always.
Yes.
Thank you, Gladys. All right, Jim, this is a very interesting set of pictures. This viewer is from Sioux City.
Okay.
And he says this was a rare picture for him to take. He thinks he found a locust turning into something else. So if you're a little kid, that probably looks like a transformer, and that's exactly what's happening, right?
It looks really bizarre, but if you flip that, there we go. We got a great one there. But this around our area in eastern Nebraska, we call cicadas locusts. It's just kind of local what we do, and they're actually the cicadas, and this is the annual cicada, comes out every year, and so the last nymphal stage crawls up from the ground to some place that can attach itself, and then the adult breaks through the skin out of that nymphal skin, and it's real delicate and tender and pale green, and then it has to harden for a while, so it'll just sit there for a while and pump up its wings. It's really beautiful to see. And then just a few hours later, it's joining the harmony of all the songs and everything like that.
Except we haven't had much of that.
We're getting better. I think maybe we were just they're late. And
right.
so we're getting more and more of it here in the evenings. And so that's a good sign. Yeah. There's hope.
That it won't snow too soon. Okay, Dennis,
Yes.
question for you. This is a Norfolk viewer. We have lots of weird things going on in Norfolk. There must be something up there. Because
In the water, maybe.
This is a white-tailed squirrel that they have in their yard. And from everything they're reading, they're saying it's rare. They want some information about it.
Well, anything like this, just like the black squirrels, which are actually more common, it's a mutation. It's a genetic mutation, just like albinism or melanism, and it is rare. I'm sure there's very few fox squirrels. It's a fox squirrel with the white tail, and it's a recessive gene probably, and it may not show up again in that population for years, or may never show up in that population. Funny part, in our lab we have a wild-caught albino, pure albino bull snake, and it was from Madison County, not near Norfolk, but it was one of the few, I think one of 3 wild-caught albino bull snakes I've ever found in the state of Nebraska, and this was brought to me by Game and Parks Commission. And it's up in that same county, Madison County. So I don't know what's happening in Madison County.
I grew up close to there, and I'm a rare catch.
I'm not going to touch that one.
All right.
You're a mutation.
Maybe that's more like it.
Okay, rare catch. Let's. You have a garden in rural Plattsmouth. This viewer picks green beans, and they notice this cool stuff on the bottom of the beans, and then on the bottom of the lima beans, and then on a dandelion, and then on a soaker hose, and they think it's some sort of a fungus or a mold.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not quite sure. The good thing is that it's not a plant pathogen, and we can tell that because it's growing on, like she said, the soaker hose and a dandelion. It's probably not hurting the beans. If it gets on the beans themselves, you should probably be able to wash it off. When you do wash it off, there probably isn't even any kind of scar tissue on the plant. It could be a fungus. If it is, it's what we call an epiphyte, and it's just living off of inert material or some kind of a carbon source that's on all of those plants and the soaker hose. But it's probably more likely another one of the slime molds, although it's just an interesting shape and size and looks very, very unique. Haven't seen anything like it. If they still have a fresh sample, I'd love to see it in the clinic to identify it. So probably a slime mold or a fungus. I'm guessing it washes right off.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. Sarah, this is a Council Bluffs, or I'm sorry, a Millard viewer. And they had a magnolia 10 years ago, and a little bit like the holly, they have a dead top and what they think is a living base. What should they do about that?
Well, the top of the tree has died, and it probably is very similar to the situation with the holly earlier, that the upper part of the plant winter killed, and so the roots of the plant are still alive, and they're sending up these suckers from the base. So I think you're just going to have to remove that upper part of the tree. If you want to try to grow it back as a multi-stemmed shrub, that's an option, but I don't think you're going to get any new growth on that upper part.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, this spring we started digging out what we are calling a rain chain on the south side of the Backyard Farmer Garden. To tell us more about this water conserving area, here's Jeff Culbertson.
What you're looking at here is what we refer to as our rain garden chain, located here on East Campus. What this is a series of holding areas, so as rainwater comes down and we're trapping it, taking it off the street so it doesn't go into the storm sewer or snow melt or any kind of water that's going down this hard surface, the street and sidewalk, we divert into this area where it is absorbed into the soil and used on the plants that would be planted in this area. So as you can see, when they went to start building this, we used some of our small equipment. We used some specialized equipment that we thought would be an interesting use of this kind of equipment to make this rain chain. And we excavated these holding areas with the idea that they would hold a certain amount of water, and as that water got to a certain level, it would then pass into the next holding area or rain garden as we go down this slope. So slowing down the velocity of the water, and again, having it being used in a positive way to help recharge the soil and feed the plants that we have in this area. We installed these paths here so that people can walk across to the Backyard Farmer Garden and not have to worry about stepping in the mud or walking through the plants. And we use these 8-inch PVC pipes then to help bring the water down the hill. As we get to the bottom of the hill, we have a larger maybe more traditional rain garden area, so an area that will hold quite a bit more water at the end of this rain chain, as we call it. And there we'll have plants that will tolerate both flooded periods and dry periods as well. And so you'd be surprised, a lot of shrubs and perennials can tolerate a relatively short period of being flooded, then followed by a relatively short period of being very dry. So that's kind of the premise that we have here, using our landscape staff to help install this area and grade it. We'll then come in and Kim and some of her students from her classes will plant, and then we'll cover this with a erosion mat that's netless, so we don't have to worry about birds and animals getting caught in the net. And then as those perennials then cover the area, then that will help hold the soil and prevent any other erosion as we go down the road. So we're looking forward to this in the coming years, you being able to take a look at this and see how this develops. So it's pretty exciting, and we're just about ready to wrap this thing up.
And as Jeff said, we'll be filling in those areas with perennial plants that can handle Nebraska's heat, drought conditions, as well as flourish when it's wet. Hopefully it will all fill in nicely by the time we start next season of Backyard Farmer, and this will be a pretty cool teaching tool. We probably will have some failures, and as always, we will share them with our audience. All right, Jim, we have, speaking of interesting conditions, this is actually at the top of the Vasco garden, and it is a big cis purple leaf plum. We found these globs on it, so
Okay.
all the way up the trunk and then along the branches. What's going on
All right.
there?
It looks like it could be the borers such as peachtree borer, but if that's the case, it sure is an extreme situation there. But the caterpillars that bore into the plum would be very young, and so at this point they're not very deep into the heartwood or anything, and so of course the tree weeps from those wounds, and they let out frass as well, and so you get those masses of, it almost looks sweet, but masses of stuff, exudates that are coming out. So that, I don't know, that seems like a pretty serious attack.
They may have brought in a canker fungus too.
Yeah,
as well,
that-
and that could be a
like you were
result of
saying
that.
earlier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we find all sorts of cool, strange things, and that will be a former tree. All right, Dennis, we have a viewer who has an elm tree, and then they saw this thing at the base, and they saw this, excuse me, the sawdust, and their first thought was that it was termites. And of course it's not, but you want to talk for a second about what animals go into holes in trees?
Well, as Jim knows, termites don't leave sawdust like you leave in a steak. They eat cellulose. But carpenter ants don't eat wood, they just chip out wood. So it could be carpenter ants, or it's so fine it looks more like a boar. If it was an animal like a rodent or a squirrel or a raccoon, you see big chunks of wood pulled out in soil. So that is from an insect hollowing it out. And whether it's an old house borer, powder post beetle, but it looks very fine frass. It doesn't look like carpenter ant, and it's definitely not termite.
Excellent. All right. Kevin, this is, we have lots of fungi pictures right now, and 2 or 3 have sent pictures of this one growing in the yard, shaded by one fairly large tree. They're wondering what it is, and are they edible, and how do they get rid of them?
Well, given that it doesn't have much of a stalk, it was found in the grass. It's brown on one side, on the top side, and I bet when it gets wet, it gets a little bit slimy. The fact that it's yellow on the bottom side, I'm thinking it's a fungus that belongs to a group called bolete fungi, and they're not particularly edible. They're not very palatable. Plus, if you're not a professional, there are some that belong in the same family that resemble edible bolete. Well, none of them are really edible, but some of them are toxic. So you don't really want to take that chance with them. I'd be willing to bet that the big tree is an ash tree. They're often found associated with ash roots. So I believe that's a bolete, and that's how they're pronounced, is bolete.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, Sarah, we have a Council Bluffs viewer who has several bur oaks in their yard, and one has been dropping its leaves very early. It's been happening for a couple years. It's gotten worse. They're old, and they really obviously do not want to lose these trees. Do we have any thoughts on this?
Well, the first thought when I looked at this picture was that there was some type of root disturbance. You know, there is a retaining wall there that's very close to the trunk of this tree. Bur oaks are rather notorious for not wanting any disturbance whatsoever of their root system. Even just driving over the root system with vehicles or foot traffic, you know, over a long period of time can cause enough compaction that bur oaks can react to that. So, you know, some type of root disturbance like that could easily cause this type of a symptom in a bur oak. Other things that could also cause it would be, you know, we discussed a little earlier, Kevin and I, a couple of disease possibilities, and maybe I'll let you mention those.
Sure, yeah, there is, I think that was from Iowa, that picture, yeah, it was taken in Iowa. So there is a disease called bur oak blight, and it looks a lot like the other oak disease, oak wilt. So those two would be, it would behoove you to determine if that's what you have, because if there are other bur oaks in the area, they could be susceptible to that. The bur oak blight is easily distinguishable. It produces spores right on the leaf, and that can be easily determined in the lab. So it might behoove them to send in a sample to get that confirmed.
All right, thanks so much. Well, we have an announcement of at least one fun thing going on in the gardening world, and that would be that Nebraska State Fair starts, and we're going to be there August 27th, 1 to 2:30 p.m. in the Nebraska building at Fauner Park. Bring your questions, bring your baggies full of things, and we will attempt to eat them in between munching and noshing on fried things on a stick. Also, tailgating season is here, and we want to know what's cooking in your kitchen on game days. NET is collecting your favorite tailgate recipes to create a special cookbook. So send in your favorite tailgating recipes to tailgaterrecipes@netnebraska.org. That would be tailgaterrecipes@netnebraska.org. So I'm guessing there will be some luscious things that show up in that cookbook. Probably all good for you, too. All right, we have an Omaha viewer that has a 13-foot blue spruce, Jim. Says they picked off 737.
Wow.
And there are more there with green needles around them, and they want to know what to do.
Okay.
When they hatch, how to spray, all that good stuff.
That's a tremendous impact that they've had on that. Put it in the Guinness Book of World Records. It's probably the first category. I think what you've done is fine. If you can't get to the ones at the top, it's probably better to wait until next spring, usually toward the end of May and into June. That's when you get the hatching of the caterpillars from those female bags. And then at that point, you can go ahead and treat them while they're very small and very susceptible to an insecticide or Bacillus thuringiensis. So it just means you're going to have to wait until next roughly June and be ready for it and do a good job.
Excellent, thank you, Jim. Elkhorn viewer, Dennis, a woodchuck. They saw a woodchuck near an 8-inch hole, but they didn't see any soil around the hole, and they're wondering, is this the normal appearance of a woodchuck hole?
Yes, woodchuck holes are usually diameter about 8 inches, 8 to 10 inches, with a lot of soil around the main entrance. And then it goes back about 20 to 25 foot in a bank where there's a smaller entrance that's covered up with no dirt around it. That's the escape hole. The only thing that in Douglas County that would be like that would be a badger, but badgers have oblong holes, usually horizontally oblong, 8 by 10, and they don't have as much dirt. So it's probably a woodchuck.
All right.
And it would mean trapping. We have a net guide for that, and so go ahead and trap them.
Excellent. All right, Kevin, we have a St. Bernard tomato question. The inside of the tomato is black. The outside looks fine, and it starts from the blossom end up. We're all laughing because we know exactly what the answer to this one is.
It's internal blossom end rot, correct? Yeah, you can get blossom end rot not just on the outside, but on the inside. And it's a calcium deficiency in the end is what it is, but it's very difficult to control. Basically, the plant can only take up calcium from the soil if the soil is moist. So if there's periods of dryness while the plant is trying to set fruit, you can get blossom end rot. A lot of people want to correct it by adding calcium, which that's not necessarily the problem a lot of times. Typically there is calcium available in the soil, it's just not taken up because the soil is dry. Or a lot of people will fertilize with heavy amounts of nitrogen up through plant fruiting, and high amounts of nitrogen can actually tie up calcium in the soil. So you might want to cut back the nitrogen once you see your tomatoes start to fruit, and that should hopefully help reduce the amount of blossom end rot you get.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Sarah, we have a little less than a minute, but we have a Columbus viewer who wants to know about putting walnut leaves on the garden in the fall. Any issues with that?
Yeah, that's not a good idea. Walnuts are the one plant you don't want to use the leaves from because they have a chemical in them, juglone, which can inhibit the growth of other plants. It affects a pretty wide range of plants, and not only the leaves, but all parts of the walnut tree contain this chemical. So it would really be better if you were to just dispose of those, or just, well, yeah, it's hard to come up with a good use for walnut leaves because it's just a problematic. So I would just get rid of them.
Yeah, and so that becomes something that probably goes in the lawn bags,
Right.
and they can do that.
You wouldn't even want to compost it, so you really just need to get rid of it.
All right. Unfortunately, because no doubt if it's a big one, they've got
Right,
Yeah.
lots of leaves.
lots of leaves. All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for Backyard Farmer. We want to say thanks to our panel for another great show, and to everybody who submitted questions and pictures. Helping us on the phones tonight, we had Master Gardeners Gladys Juring, George Edgar, Carol Rustad, George Maley, and John Cariato. From Finke Gardens was Cole Weston. Next time on Backyard Farmer, we'll be showing you contrasting choices for containers. We'll mix and match plants with pots, and we'll help you see what stands out and what blends in. We'll also be taking a look at a miniature fairy garden. Thanks for watching. Good night, good gardening, and we'll see you all next week right here on Backyard Farmer.